Hey, welcome to Prisca Theologia. Today we are going to be doing a presentation, a syncretic presentation, um, merging both East and West philosophies. Going to be discussing the supreme truth of the soul, its individuality, the soul's, its similarities or correspondences to the supreme spirit. From the Eastern perspective as well as the Western. So we're just going to be taking a look at this philosophy and understanding it from a higher perspective. So we know that we're in an age of nihilism where we're taught that there is no such thing as truth, or there's no such thing as the supreme truth, and that everyone can have their own truth and various different, perspectives. Whatever feels right to you at the time becomes your truth. But this was not how it was, and this is not how it is. There's a supreme truth or an objective truth, and then everything else, there's the truth, the supreme truth of the invisible realm, the causal realm, and then there are the subjective truths of the realm of appearances. So essentially, there are two forms of truth, but there's the truth of appearances and then the truth of absolutes. And here we're concerned with the truth of absolutes, and we're going to be learning about the science of the soul and how it manifests and its dual aspects. We'll be looking at it from both Eastern and Western perspectives. So first, we're going to get a good glimpse at the two aspects from the East that we learn, which would be Purusha and Prakriti. Now, as you can see in this diagram, I found it very helpful. Purusha and Prakriti, they're both eternal and uncreated. So they're both two dual manifestations of the monad. We have the monad, which is number one, which is dual in aspect or almost androgyne. So then this supreme, the first being above being, essentially, is this dual aspect. The supreme creator is both Purusha and Prakriti. Now these two forces separate, and they're two eternal rays from the one source. We have the one source that splits into these two aspects, male and female. This is what we went over in the presentation, Astral Theology and Adam and Eve, in the previous video. So, Purusha being spirit, person, self, or consciousness. So in the Indian philosophy, and particularly in the dualistic system, the eternal authentic spirit, it is the masculine creating, or actually the eternal uncreated masculine potential, which is Purusha, which is completely, I would say, like impersonally passive, just like a father would be here in this realm. We kind of see him taking care of the back end things, being a little bit more passive, while the mother or Prakriti feminine energy is more in the state of doing things, managing things on a personal level. So as we can see, they're both eternal and uncreated, except Purusha, the supreme masculine spirit, is more of passive, does not create. It's absolute. And see this masculine Purusha in the beginning and the Kabbalistic system, which you would see like the divine masculine, gives permission or instructs Prakriti, or the divine feminine, to go and create the realm, create the five elements. So Prakriti, under direction of Purusha, goes and creates this material existence, this realm of the four elements plus five being the ether. So we can see this is where, like, the demiurge, or the physical created aspect, or the personal aspect of the created being, is the cause and effect. It's the matter and the energy, the indestructible energies of the physical realm, being the three gunas, which would be sattva, goodness, rajas, passion, and tamas, which would be ignorance or inertia, as well as the three states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. These three aspects, and these three states of consciousness are related to Prakriti, which is eternal, uncreated, and absolute, but it's under the direction of Purusha, which is the eternal, uncreated, passive energy or conscious intelligence. Neither the cause nor the effect, neither born, completely indestructible. The part of us that is completely unmanifest and never manifest in the material realm. That's why Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, I am above the three gunas. I am the witness of the three states of consciousness. So in a way, he would be the fourth state of consciousness, above the three and above the four elements. So we have the four elements, which would be Prakriti, the three states of consciousness, which would be Prakriti, the feminine aspect of the creator. And then you have the substratum or the spiritual consciousness behind those effects, which is be the eternal uncreated Purusha, or the higher spirit. Hence, that's why Krishna is represented as the higher spirit as he walks upon, the seven serpent snakes, or Jesus walks upon the water, because he's Purusha. Purusha is the masculine spirit. It is above the material modes of nature, so it can walk on water, it can transmute, turn water into wine, it can always do these magnificent, that's why he who has faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. That's the Purusha spirit speaking. The masculine spirit, which is above the causal plane of existence, has the power over the four elements and the three states of consciousness. When we see Prakriti as nature, we have sky, earth, water, air, fire, three states of consciousness being the nature or source of this physical existence, the womb or the tomb of creation, which is helping us become individualized entities and gestating within this womb so that we can return to Purusha, the eternal creator. So be the material nature in its germinal state, eternal beyond perception. So it's like your own being. It's the personal nature, your mind, the senses, sound, touch, hearing, feeling, seeing, the three states of consciousness, dreaming, dreamless, waking state, the four elements, fire, water, earth, air, the mind, the body. Know these to be the feminine aspect of the spirit, Prakriti, and to be under control of Purusha. Purusha instructed Prakriti to go and create, go and become a womb, to impregnate the womb with the spiritual archetypes and seeds to create endless myriads of beings. This is how nature works. The dualistic nature of the two spirits would be, like, for example, in the Kabbalistic system, we have Kether at the top, Kether, Chokman, Bana. Yeah, the unified Kether, which has both masculine and feminine, and those eternal rays project Adam and Eve, wisdom and love, eternal manifestations of truth. And this would be known as Krishna and Radharani, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or Purusha and Prakriti. And this is what kind of allows us to have the existence that we do have. So when the initiate wants to start inquiring, as we're in the human state of consciousness, we go through the mineral, the plant, the animal, and finally at human, we have access to all five elements. Being access to all five elements, we have the spirit, the power of ether, which allows us to have access to the mind for self-reflection and inquiry, as well as contemplation. So that's what the Upanishads are all about. The students that are born within this realm, contemplating on it, there whence they came, contemplating on their cause, contemplating on their inherent dissolution. So it says, students of Brahman, or eternal truth, discuss, what is the cause? Is it Brahman? Whence we are born? Why do we live? Where is our final rest? Under whose orders are we? Who knows the Brahman, subjected to the law of happiness and misery? So when we wake up from the tomb of matter, we begin to contemplate on our inner self, as well as the supreme self, which is Purusha. So we have our individual aspect created form, which is Prakriti, our individual soul, and then we have the higher spiritual aspect, Purusha, and Prakriti starts to become self-cognizant, to begin to look over its shoulder to Purusha, which is the Supreme Spirit, and starts to comprehend and contemplate its whereabouts. So we begin to ask questions of self-inquiry. This is jnana yoga, where we begin to ask ourselves, who am I, from moment to moment, and find where these thoughts germinate from, find the part of ourselves that these thoughts are born. If the thoughts are Prakriti, then we must find Purusha, the eternal witness within that is watching the drama of creation take place. See, the Supreme Spirit Brahman is beyond the four elements. We have earth, water, fire, and air. Now, air and fire are the two spiritual elements that are most subtle and most like Brahman. We see in the Zoroastrians worshipped fire as a supreme spirit. And also in the Upanishads, it says the glow of the sun, or the glow of fire, and the radiance of the sun is akin to the supreme soul or the supreme spirit. In the same way, Kether on the tree of life, which is Aleph, the Hebrew letter A, Aleph, which is like air. But when we're talking about air, we're talking about spiritual transcendental air that's more subtle than both fire and air, more subtle than fifth element ether. We're going beyond to find the absolute cause, which is basically beyond material incarnation. So we can see the mind is more subtle than the body. The four elements are earth, water, air, and fire. And the mind is akin to ether, or the fifth element. So Atman is still more subtle. Atman is the supreme self, individualized from Brahman. So we have Brahman, then Brahman becomes Atman when it becomes individualized, like the circle and the dot. So, Atman is more subtle than the mind and is fluent in everywhere and nowhere at the same time, similar to air. So this is why it's symbolized by air or sometimes fire. But the earth and water elements are of the body, they're of the flesh. That's why we're baptized in earth, when we're physically manifested into this realm. We go through the entombed in earth, and then bodies of earth and water. Notice we have fluids in our body, we have lots of earth, and then the air element is what mediates, our breath. We have our breath and our mind, which connects us to our soul, and then our soul connects us to intelligence and spirit. So it's from like a top-down hierarchy. We have to go from the most subtle to gross. And the subtle aspects, i.e. the air, the spirit, and the fire, have to take control and command of the earth and water and purify them. This is where our physical ego or physical individuality comes from, by spiritualizing these elements and making them become all unified, so that we can finally unleash the Supreme Spirit and manifest in the material realm. So as we can see, the four elements manifest from counter space, being the soul crystallizes into matter. The effulgence of the four elements come from the ether, and the ether comes from none other than the Supreme Spirit Brahman. So we know that Purusha or Brahman manifests Prakriti, which is the four elements and the conditions and that allow us to have the experience that we have. So we're under the laws of time, nature, law, chance, matter, energy, intelligence. Neither these nor a combination of these can bear examination because of their own birth identity and the existence of the self. The self also is not a free agent, being under the law, under the sway of happiness and misery. In this case, the inferior ego is trapped between aversion and attraction to external nature of the elements. So Purusha creates individual aspects of itself that descend into the material incarnation to have these individual experiences and to create permanent vessels or permanent personalities or permanent elemental configurations that we take with us after we die. So after we die, we don't just melt into the water or melt into the fog of the spirit. This whole point was to incarnate here in a womb, to gestate and to become individualized, so that we can take this with us when we go back up the ladder. We experience Prakriti to gain knowledge of what we are as opposed to what we're not, to gain knowledge of all of the effulgences of the impersonal energy that comes from the personal energy of Purusha. See, the impersonal energies are like the mind, the four elements, and then the personal energy is the intelligence, the love, and the wisdom, the motherly love and the fatherly wisdom. So this is how we manifest here in this realm, self-cognizant as individuals. We have that dual aspect of ourselves, the Purusha and the Prakriti within, or the feminine and masculine aspect. So we come to these conclusions by practicing the method of meditation. So this comes from the Upanishads. It says, practicing the method of meditation, they realize that being who is the God of religion, the self of philosophy, and the energy of science, who exists as the self-luminous power in everyone, who is the source of intellect, emotions, and will, who is one without a second, who presides over all of the causes enumerated above, beginning with time and ending with the individual soul, and who had been incomprehensible because of the limitations of their own intellect. So we can use meditation in the mind, which are the subtle elements, to go within and concentrate on the self within, because that self is more subtle than the mind. And once we tap into that self, we then bridge ourselves to counter space, the immaterial realm of Purusha. This is where we start incarnating our being. And we do this through the path of meditation, contemplation, inward focus and attention, to also be on the righteous path of charity and selfless service to the Creator, so that we can begin to awaken the forces within that allow our Prakriti, or our physical manifestation, to become 100% spiritualized by Purusha. So Purusha and Prakriti come together and form the self-awakened consciousness. That's the son, or the child, the father, mother, and the child. And it's very interesting to note, we have here in Morals of Dogma, it says, now the Egyptians arranged their deities in triads, the father, or the spirit, or active principle, or generative power, and the mother, or matter, or the passive principle, or the conceptive power, and the son, issue, or product, the universe proceeding from the two principles. These were Osiris, Isis, and Horus. In the same way, Plato gives us thought, the father, primitive matter, the mother, and cosmos, the world, the son, the universe animated by his soul. Triads of the same kind are found in the Kabbalah. So the beautiful triad of the father sky, mother earth, and then the children being the individual conscious entities. The whole point of creation is to become eternally individualized and to proceed back from whence we came, back to the causal plane, with the knowledge of creation and the knowledge of the four elements and the knowledge of the three states of consciousness, and to self-cognitize this and allow it to bring us to a higher state of cognizance that we did not have before we descended into Prakriti. So these dual aspects happen in the Western tradition as well. As you know, when Moses recognized the supreme spirit in the burning bush, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So this represents our individual jiva, which is the individualized soul, or the feminine aspect, recognizing the supreme controller, which is Purusha, the higher mind, the higher incomprehensible spirit that's on manifest. And that is the substratum, or the I am, in which our individual personality manifests. So we recognize the supreme controller. This is why in the Moses story, it says the Ark of the Covenant is hidden in our chest. Well, our heart resides in our chest. And when we open up that chest, we have the Ark of the Covenant, which is the supreme truth, or the objective truth, not just someone's truth or a subjective truth or a truth of appearance, but the eternal truth of creation, of where we came from, why we came from that, who we are as individuals, and what happens after death. These are the mysteries of the spirit. We can understand this by going through both Eastern and Western traditions to come to the conclusion of our immortality, or come to the conclusion that life has a purpose, that there is an intelligent creator behind the effects that we see, and that there is a reason that why we do the things that we do. There, like comes from like, personal comes from personal. So you have those two aspects, the father and the mother, spirit, matter, Purusha, Prakriti. Moses, and then we have the burning bush. So we have the two characters, both spiritualized, but two aspects of the same thing. In the same way, like when Krishna reveals his true form to Arjuna, and we see the repeated duality of the soul and the spirit, Arjuna being the human soul enlightened, and then we have the super soul, which is Krishna, or the supreme controller, the Purusha. So you have Prakriti being Arjuna and Purusha being Krishna. See, the creator is hidden in the creation, but not inside of it. Just like Walter Russell said, the mind of the creator, or the infinite creator, is outside of creation. It is not subjected to the elements. This is why we have the beautiful tells of Krishna and Jesus doing miracles, because those miracles transcend the physical nature of reality. So in the Upanishads, it has a story where it says the two birds, inseparable companions, perch on the same tree. One eats the fruit, the other looks on. The first bird is our individual self, feeding on the pleasures and pains of this world. The other is the universal self, silently witnessing it all. So study this passage in the picture and you will understand the difference between Prakriti and Purusha, the spirit and the individual soul. Notice Krishna is always above incarnation, always above the fruits. He is just simply witnessing and watching. And then we have the bird, which is enjoying the fruits of the tree of good and evil, the knowledge of incarnation, the sine wave, individual. It's almost as if this supreme self is giving birth to the individual selves and nurturing it, protecting it, and watching over it. That's why in the Freemasons have the symbol of the all-seeing eye of God, because the subconscious mind, or the all-seeing eye, never sleeps, never shuts off. When this whole material world goes to sleep, the supreme self is always awake, eternally awake, always watching. So as we can see, the nature of man and woman is dual. We have our own individual soul that comes from the supreme source. In split in occult science, we have Adam and Eve, the eternal split of wisdom and love from the top of the tree of life, Kether. It's good to know that in occult science, the soul is considered feminine. So essentially, like, we are the gopis, as physical jivas, or individual sense of self, are the gopis, and then Krishna is the supreme spirit. In the story of the East, we have Krishna and the female gopis, or Krishna and Radharani and the gopis, or his devotees. We have Jesus and the disciples. So we have these different aspects. It's always says to be the bridegroom of Christ. Well, why would you want to be the bridegroom of Christ? Well, because Christ is Purusha, the masculine entity, the spirit, and then the souls, or individualized entities, considered the female aspect, just allegorically speaking. So the individual soul, or jiva, is receptive and experiences the fruit. The bird perched on top looks and just witnesses. It is represented as the spirit, or the masculine Purusha, as you can see. These two are inseparable, and they are eternally with us. So we always will have Krishna and Arjuna, Moses and the burning bush, Jesus and the Father who art in heaven. It's all referring to spiritual science and spiritual psychology and astrotheology, and how it relates to ourselves on a mental level, emotional, as well as physical. This happens throughout our entire life. We're always guided by the supreme consciousness, the spirit that's incomprehensible, and then we have the one that is going through the journey, the soul, or the individual soul, that is eating the fruit on the tree, or experiencing life in and of itself. And we're developing this individual aspect to take it with us forever, so that we can have eternal individuality, so that we can go back to the supreme Purusha, and experience differentiation, but oneness. So be at one with it, but different, and to be qualitatively, because the truth is that we're qualitatively the same, but in quantity we're different. We'll always be the breadcrumbs of the bread itself. So bread being the Purusha, the breadcrumbs being Prakriti. So by recognizing these truths, we can take notice of the inner witness, or the Purusha, the inner soul, the one that witnesses. And we can stop identifying with the physical ego or the aspects of the three states of consciousness, whether they be, action, inaction, and neutrality, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, hot, cold, pleasure, pain. We begin to take identification with the witness part, which does not have to be enthralled or perturbed by the nature of Prakriti. Once we have knowledge of Purusha, we understand that our true self is beyond the three states of consciousness and the four elements, and we no longer have to experience suffering, or better, to understand that we can learn how to suffer appropriately because we understand the knowledge of these dualities. So we can be the bird that witnesses, and we can also accept and nurture the inner bird within us that is enjoying the fruits of the physical Prakriti incarnate, or the physical manifestation. So it's a combined experience. Don't fight it, just let it be. Watch. The main thing of occult esoteric practices, if you're going to do one thing and nothing else, according to Rudolf Steiner, is to pay attention to all things, to always watch, to always observe, to always look at your actions in life through almost as if you're looking at it through a screen, and to know that you are what is watching the projector and the projection, and to not get confused or identified with the body and mind. You can see that they work and move on their own. Prakriti is like a self-functioning entity in and of itself that goes automatically, while Purusha is conscious and witnesses the things that take place. This is where we get into the mysteries of Gemini, because Gemini represents the split of the monad into male and female, as well as the dual aspects of consciousness, the witness and the witnessed. Gemini relates to the conscious mind's relationship with the subconscious mind. So we have Adam and Eve. So we have Adam's the conscious mind, Eve's the subconscious mind. The conscious mind impregnates the subconscious mind, and to develop our consciousness, which is action. In the same way, we have this triad of the Kether, Chokma, Binah, Prakriti, Purusha, Brahman, splitting into Prakriti and Purusha. So our conscious mind is mirrored onto itself. The conscious mind is the male aspect. The subconscious mind is the female receptive aspect. Both are products and under control of the superconscious mind, or the oversoul. In the Upanishads, it says, we think of him as the universe resembling a wheel, which has only felly with a triple tire, 16 extremities, 50 spokes, 20 counter spokes, and 6 sets of 8, which is driven along 3 different roads by the means of a belt that is single yet manifold, and which each revolution gives rise to 2. So this is explaining the beautiful glory of Brahman and how the ancients kind of saw it in their mind allegorically. In the Bible or the Upanishads, when it starts talking about counter spokes or cubics, it's good to know that this is symbolic, talking about the eternal nature of the creation, the 7 planets, the 12 zodiac, the clock-like nature of the universe, the cyclical patterns, the eternal presence of the Creator throbbing through every material aspect that we see in front of us. We think of him in his manifestation as the universe, who is like a river that contains the waters of 5 streams, that has 5 big turnings due to 5 causes, that has the 5 pranas for the waves, the mind, the basis of 5-fold perception, for the source, and the 5-fold misery for its rapids, and has 5 whirlpools, 5 branches, and 5 innumerable aspects. This is referring to the 5 senses, the 5 elements, and the 5 miseries. Notice that Brahman manifestation, the one who manifests the entire universe, they're allegorizing this in like rivers and whirlpools and streams. Just like in the Bible, when it says the Garden of Eden, there were 4 rivers that poured forth from the, it's all talking about anagological spiritual science. We have the manifestation from the most subtle to the gross. We have ether, which is it's basically like space, or the emanation of the supreme spirit. So we have spirit, then it has spirit and ether manifesting fire, air, water, earth, each with 5 miseries of prenatal life, prenatal existence, life, death, losing loved ones, and disease. So we experience the 5 inflictions, the crucifixion of the soul into matter gives us these miseries. And we have to transmute these elements under the guidance of the Supreme Spirit, which is completely immutable, immortal, and outside of the 4 elements. This is why the pentagram is upright and the spirit side of it is above these 4, which are considered the lesser aspects. So in this infinite will of Brahman, in which everything lives and rests, the pilgrim soul is whirled about, knowing the individual soul regarded as separate, to be itself the moving force, and blessed by him, it attains immortality. So we finally gain full cognizant knowledge of Purusha, and we focus on the Supreme Self and start to manage and control the 4 elements under the dominance of the spirit and the will. Then we can finally have self-realization occur, which is on a higher level than just simple illumination. Many people and a lot of people become illuminated, but not many become self-realized. Self-realized is when you understand Purusha, the supreme controller, and start doing selfless service to the creator, which would be Krishna, Christ, Quetzalcoatl, or any of the great names for the Logos, which is the supreme emanation or the supreme spirit Brahman. So you know that the Upanishads show the Atman is more subtle than the mind and is above the 4 elements and the 5 senses. Brahman is invisible and shines pure and everlasting. It is said where Brahman is, the sun does not shine. Where Brahman resides, the sun doesn't shine, nor the stars, nor the moon, nor the earth fires. Brahman is the self-effulgent, and the radiance of Brahman is the source of all of these lesser lights. So the light of fire, the light of moon, or all of these different various lights that we see has its source in the spirit of Brahman. So that's why in the Upanishads it says where Brahman resides, there is no sunshine, there is no heat or fire, etc., because Brahman's the supreme source. In the same way, our souls, our individual Atmans, are the effect of the supreme spirit that is everlasting and eternal. Brahman causes all of our manifestations as well as the material universe, but it is beyond it and not subject to it. Brahman is superpersonal or above personal and impersonal. There have been many arguments in the East as to whether the Supreme Being is personal or impersonal. Ramakrishna quoted the great holy sage Kabir and claimed that the Father is impersonal and the Mother is personal. And these 2 aspects of the highest Supreme Creator are one and the same. Krishna and Radharani, Purusha and Prakriti. And we have these individual manifestations within ourselves, and the communication between these 2 aspects are what give us all of the stories that we have. The Bible, the Upanishads, the Torah, all of this comes from spiritual science, and the spiritual science is eternal and has been already written in the celestials as all the star constellations, and the eternal clock, as we talked about in the slideshow, is expressing Brahman as an eternal will or eternal clock, or the eternal rota or Torah, the will of creation, the will of eternal life. So we know that the world is made of both electricity and magnetism. These 2 polarities have a source or unified knower. That unified knower is also known as Krishna. Krishna and Brahma are one and the same. Christ and the Logos, or the supreme universal intelligence, is one and the same with Krishna and Brahman. The supreme creator has 3 different manifestations. One is personal, individualized being, where the light comes from. The second is the effulgence or the omnipotence of the creator, which is akin to the light of the sun. So we have the sun, which is the individualized Bhagavan or eternal being, and we have its omnipotent rays, which is the creator of all things, and the impersonal intelligence, aka Prakriti. By purifying the mind and entering into silence, we contemplate on Brahman just like the ancient sages did, and we begin to purify our actions by merging our understanding and sitting consciously in the substratum of our very existence. So it takes us to a state that is beyond the mind, so that we begin to recognize the body and mind as separate from the individual witness or soul. And we can know our unlimited nature as children of God or the Creator by knowing our true self is in counter space, which is outside of the physical incarnation. So the Upanishads carry the same truth as the Abrahamic faiths and the Old and New Testament. We know that Brahman, in particularity of Christianity, is Abraham or Brahma, not to be confused with Brahmin. Brahma was the first creator, the creator of all the worlds, the physical realms. And according to the East, is the self-created being that created this world, akin to the demiurgos. So Brahma is the first created being, or the creator God, who has the source in Brahmin. So this is allegorized as Abraham and Sarah, or Saraswati, Brahman and Saraswati, Abraham and Sarah, being the father of the Israelites, or the chosen people of God. So we know that in astrophysiology, Brahman is a cerebram, Abraham, cerebram, or Abram, Sarah and Abram. When Abraham and Sarah come together, we have the two hemispheres of the brain, Sarah, Abram, or Brahma and Saraswati, which all are unified in the top, which is the unified essence that split these two from that unified field. When we dwell in silence and contemplate on our inner being by placing our awareness on the Purusha, which is the heart of our being, we then transcend the mind and begin the alchemical process of purification. This is why in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, the body is likened onto a chariot, no consciousness, similar to a machine. And then we have the driver of the chariot, which is the Supreme Spirit, because the Supreme Spirit can see without eyes, hear without ears, taste without a tongue. But through us, through these physical machines, it experiences these modes of physical electrical sensations via the body. But because it's the source of these different senses and things, it has that in and of itself. In and of itself, it has the ability to see, to hear, to taste. But these are transcendental senses that don't need a physical body to utilize them. In a sense, when we use these senses, we are using a lesser form of them. It's almost as if we're using a more gross, dense form of them. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, sounds deafen the ear, sight blinds the eyes, thoughts weaken the mind, desires wither the heart. Because the body is food for the consciousness and utilizes these forces and these senses on a gross level. These have their source in a transcendental invisible realm. So the driver of the chariot is the individualized spark of the Supreme Spirit Brahman. According to the Upanishads, a particle of the infinite consciousness becomes our finite consciousness or individualized being. We come here to make our individuality grow in the womb of creation. The Divine Mother nurtures the soul or individuality until it matures and then proceeds up the ladder to more transcendental realms of existence. The Supreme Spirit resides as witness or Purusha within our heart. The Jiva, or the individualized Prakriti, is the one who lives in the realm of darkness and light, good and evil, labor and rest. The Supreme Spirit works not, and is declared by the Upanishads as the Supreme Spirit does no work, even though it appears to look as if it works. All the work and labor is done by Prakriti, or the modes of nature, the physical realm. The Supreme Spirit is aloof. This is also in the Upanishads. It depicts the dual nature of our soul and spirit. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this presentation on transcendental science of the soul, and looking forward to seeing you guys next time.